She was shaking so badly he thought she might actually die right there, alone at a frozen bus stop. Too proud to ask for help, the snow came down like ash from the sky, soft, relentless, silent. Most of the city had already tucked itself away, but there she was, curled in on herself at a frozen bus stop, barely breathing under her threadbare coat. Her nurse scrubs peeked out beneath it, soaked and clinging to her knees. Her fingers were purple, her phone dead in her lap, and yet she sat there, waiting for a bus that was never going to come. From inside a charcoal gray Range Rover, a man watched her. He didn't belong to this street. The luxury of his vehicle, the watch on his wrist, the calm in his eyes, none of it fit the bleakness outside. But still, he stopped. He stepped into the snow, not bothering with gloves. His shoes crunched. Toward her. "Get in," he said firmly, no hesitation in his voice. "You're not dying on a bench tonight." The nurse startled, shrinking back. "What? I don't know you." He didn't move closer, but his presence was undeniable. "I'm not a creep," he said, voice steady but kind. "But I'm also not about to drive past someone freezing to death. My car's heated, you can sit in the back seat. Or stay here and lose a toe, your choice." She hesitated, panic flashing across her wine-burned face. "I can figure it out? I'm just waiting for the next bus." "There is no next bus," he interrupted gently. "The city shut them down an hour ago. Roads are closing. And you're not walking anywhere dressed like that." When she didn't move, he pulled off his coat, a black wool piece that clearly cost more than her rent, and handed it to her. "Put this on." She didn't reach for it. So he added, "You don't have to trust me. Just don't freeze because of pride." After a long pause, she took it, and that's how it started. If this already made you feel something, make sure to subscribe, and hit the bell for more real-life emotional stories. The rest only gets deeper. ***, Nora slid into the Range Rover slowly, her legs aching from hours of standing and the unforgiving cold. The door shut with a soft thud behind her, sealing her into warmth so immediate and complete it stole her breath. The scent of leather and something faintly woodsy filled her nose. Not cologne, more like money, clean, comfortable, safe. She stayed silent. The man climbed in on the other side, his expression unreadable. He glanced once at her before pulling the vehicle smoothly away from the curb. No words, just snowflakes streaking across the windshield and the soft hum of heated air between them. Nora clutched his coat around her tighter. She was still shivering. "Where do you live?" he asked, voice quiet but direct. "Farwood," she replied, blinking. "Corner of Glen and Ash." "That's over 30 blocks uphill." "Yeah." He gave a small nod and turned the wheel with practiced ease. "I'll take you there." "You don't have to." "I know," he interrupted. "But I will." More silence. She hated awkward silences. But this one wasn't. It felt more like waiting. Like they were both holding their breath and didn't know why. "You didn't have to stop," she said eventually, staring out the window. "Most people wouldn't." "I'm not most people," he replied, and it should have sounded arrogant, but it didn't. It was a simple fact. She studied his profile, sharp jaw, steady eyes. Everything about him looked controlled, like even his silence was calculated. Still, something in the way he gripped the steering wheel made her think this wasn't normal for him, picking up strangers at midnight. He didn't seem reckless. "Just, sure, I'm Nora," she said suddenly. He nodded once. "Elias." "Thanks." "Elias, you don't have to thank me," he said, eyes on the road. "You were freezing. It's common sense." "Common sense doesn't usually stop in the snow at midnight." He glanced at her, one eyebrow raised. "Maybe it should." She gave a short laugh, then immediately regretted it. Her voice cracked from dryness and exhaustion. Elias didn't comment on it. He just reached into the console and passed her a bottle of water, unopened, ice cold. "Drink that." She did, slowly, gratefully. When they reached her building, it looked darker than usual. The top floors had lost power again, a common occurrence in old walk-ups like hers. Elias stared up at it, then back at her. "You sure you want to go in there tonight?" Nora swallowed. "It's where I live." He didn't argue. But his expression didn't soften, either. "Look, I have a guest room. Clean bed. Warm place to sleep. You can lock the door. I won't come near it. Nora blinked. Wait, what? You're exhausted. That's obvious. I have more space than I need. Just one night. Then tomorrow you can go wherever you want. I'm not going to. She hesitated. Truth was, the idea of climbing 5 flights of stairs in a freezing building while still soaking wet made her want to cry. She didn't answer Dot, so he said simply, You don't have to say yes. Just don't say no because of fear. And somehow that landed 5 minutes later. She was stepping out of the Range Rover into a private underground garage she didn't even know existed in this part of the city. A soft elevator whisked them upward. No keys, just a security code. When the doors opened, Nora blinked. She wasn't prepared to floor dash to ceiling windows. A fireplace crackling. Minimalist furniture, warm lights, the faint smell of vanilla and cedar. Everything felt intentional. Comfortable, quiet, room on the left, Elias said, pointing. There's clean stuff in the drawer. Won't fit perfectly. But it'll keep you warm, Nora looked at him slowly. Why are you doing this? He shrugged. Because I can. And that was it. No charm. No manipulation, no weird energy. Just calm. Nora disappeared down the hallway, confused by everything. Especially the fact that for the first time in weeks her shoulders began to relax. Tomorrow would still be hard, but tonight she might sleep without shaking. ***. The guest room was warmer than she expected. Nora stood there for a moment just inside the doorway, taking it in. The sheets were neatly folded. A folded towel sat at the foot of the bed. The scent in the air was lavender, not overpowering but subtle. Comforting. She changed into the oversized gray sweater and sweatpants left for her in the drawer. They hung off her like blankets, swallowing her whole, but they were warm. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel cold, not just in her body. In her bones. She thought she would fall asleep the second her head hit the pillow, but she didn't. Instead, she found herself padding barefoot into the hallway, drawn by the faint sound of clinking from the kitchen. She had meant to ask for water. What she saw stopped her in her tracks. Elias, the man who owned this impeccable apartment, who looked like he belonged on the cover of Forbes, was standing at the stove in a white t-shirt and dark slacks, stirring something in a small saucepan. No. Chef. No takeout. Just him. Cooking. He noticed her and gave a slight nod. I figured you might be hungry. She blinked. What are you making? Ramen, he said simply. Nothing fancy, just warm. She stepped a little closer, unsure why. This image of him, sleeves rolled, barefoot, cooking at midnight, made her chest ache a little. You didn't have to. Neither did you. He replied, but you let me drive you here. That shut her up. Elias poured the steaming noodles into a bowl and slid it across the marble counter. Sit, he said. Nora hesitated, then climbed onto one of the stools. The stool was soft leather, the bowl warm beneath her hands, and the smell? Divine. She looked at him like he was from another planet. You're not what I expected, she said. He didn't flinch. Neither are you. She raised her chopsticks slowly, her hands trembling slightly from hunger, and took the first bite. Her eyes widened. This is really good. He gave the faintest smirk, but didn't boast. Just poured himself tea, and leaned against the counter across from her. Long shift? He asked. She nodded, her mouth full. How long? 14 hours. She swallowed. Double shift. I lost track, missed lunch, and then I missed the last bus. He nodded. Slowly. You work at Northgate? How did you? Saw your badge, he replied. Earlier. Nora exhaled a little. Not creepy. Just observant. The ramen disappeared faster than she expected. And when she set down the empty bowl, Elias slid a folded napkin her way. She didn't realize how emotional she'd become until she blinked and tears threatened to spill. I'm sorry, she whispered, embarrassed. Don't be. He said simply. She looked at him, the storm still painting soft shadows across the tall windows behind him. His presence was steady, quiet, uncomplicated. How do you live like this? She asked softly, gesturing to the elegant space. It's so quiet. I like silence, he said. Always have. Nora nodded slowly. Most people find. It lonely, she said. He looked at her carefully. Sometimes it is. A beat passed. She didn't ask why. And he didn't offer, but something cracked open between them in that stillness. Something neither of them could name. Yet both felt, when she went back to bed that night, her belly full and her heart strangely heavy, she looked out the tall guest room window and whispered into the dark, "What are you doing, Nora?" She didn't know, but for the first time in a long time, she wasn't scared of tomorrow. Nora woke up to the scent of fresh coffee and the kind of stillness that didn't feel empty. It felt safe. Golden morning light poured in through the window. For a few seconds, she forgot where she was. The softness of the sheets, the absence of noise, none of it matched her usual life. Then it came back. The storm, the bus stop. The man with the quiet voice and expensive coat, the ramen. She sat up slowly. Her body ached in places she hadn't felt in weeks. The kind of ache that reminded her she hadn't stopped moving in far too long. On the nightstand beside her bed, a small handwritten note lay folded neatly. "There's coffee in the kitchen. Money on the counter if you need a cab. No pressure. Leave when you're ready, Elias." Nora stared at the handwriting, slanted, precise, strangely thoughtful. She padded out into the apartment again, still in the oversized sweater, her bare feet silent against the floor. Elias was nowhere in sight. On the counter, just like he said, sat a crisp $100 bill, a business card, and a steaming mug already poured. Black coffee, no sugar. His business card read, Elias Grant & Wells Capital Private Equity. Infrastructure. Global. Nora stared at the words, something tugging at her memory. She'd heard the name before, somewhere. A magazine? A headline? She couldn't recall. So he was rich. Rich. Which made everything even more confusing. She took the coffee, folded the money, and placed it in her coat pocket. She considered the card, then left it on the counter and walked out without leaving. A note. 3 days passed. She didn't call, but she couldn't stop thinking about him, and not just because of the ride. Or the soup. Or the apartment. It was the way he looked at her. Not like she was fragile, not like she was some project to fix, but like he saw something familiar, something that scared him. 2. On the fourth evening, Nora found herself volunteering at the city-run health fair. She hadn't planned on it. She was running on fumes. But the hospital was short-staffed again, and the mobile clinic needed nurses. So there she was, checking vitals in a freezing church basement filled with fold-out chairs and people who had nowhere else to go for care. She knelt beside an elderly man in a warm coat, gently wrapping the cuff around his thin arm. He didn't have ID or insurance or family, but he had the kindest eyes. "You came all the way in this weather?" she asked. He smiled. "Wasn't gonna miss a chance to be seen by an angel." Nora laughed softly. And then she felt it. A shift in the air. She looked up. He was there. Elias stood in the back of the room, hands in his coat pockets, eyes on her. No entourage, no announcement. Just him, watching her. She blinked, unsure if she was imagining it, but he didn't move. Just waited. When the crowd finally thinned, she made her way over. "You followed me?" she asked, half amused, half unsettled. "No," he said calmly. "I fund this program every year." "I just didn't expect to see you." She raised a brow. "You fund this?" He nodded, quietly. "You don't seem like the quiet donation type." "I'm full of surprises." She folded her arms. "You've been watching me?" "No," he said, then paused, just noticing. They stood in silence again, something that was quickly becoming their language. Then Elias said quietly, "My mother was a nurse. She used to bring me to clinics like this. I hated it back then. And now? Now I think I understand." Nora tilted her head. "You never mentioned that. There's a lot I don't mention." A pause, then softly he added, "You stayed in my guest room. You didn't have to trust me. But you did, I remember that." She looked at him, unsure what to say. So he said it for her. "Come get coffee with me, just coffee. No pressure." And this time she nodded. It was just coffee. That's what she told herself, but somehow it didn't feel that way. They sat across from each other at a quiet corner cafe a block from the health fair. No suits, no pretenses. Just two people nursing warm cups and chipped ceramic mugs. Nora stirred her drink, watching the steam rise. Elias didn't touch his coffee. He just sat back, hands folded around the cup, watching her, not staring, not analyzing, just seeing. She cleared her throat. So, you don't normally pick up? Strangers at bus stops, I'm guessing. His lips twitched slightly. No, first time. And cooking ramen at 1 a.m.? That also part of the billionaire playbook? He gave a quiet chuckle. If it is, I missed that memo. She leaned her elbows on the table. You know, I had you pegged all wrong. I'm not offended. You're not offended a woman thought you might be a rich weirdo? I am a rich weirdo, Elias said, but not the dangerous kind. She laughed. Actually laughed. It surprised both of them. He studied her for a second, then asked, Why do you volunteer? After 14-hour shifts, after losing sleep, after skipping meals, Nora's smile faded. Because I've been on the other side. He waited, patient. I was raised by my grandmother. She died when I was 19. I was on my own after that. I remember waiting in clinics like that, one praying someone would take me seriously even when I didn't have an address or a decent pair of shoes. She took a sip. I told myself if I ever made it through nursing school, I'd go back. Not for pity, but for dignity. For the people who feel invisible. Elias looked away briefly, nodding. Then he surprised her. My mother was like that. He said quietly, she'd stay late with patients. Missed dinner more times than I could count. When she died, something changed in me. Nora leaned in, softened. What changed? I stopped expecting anyone to stay. She didn't answer, because she knew exactly what that felt like. They didn't touch hands. They didn't speak in poetic metaphors. But in that silence, something settled between them, something heavy and real. When they left the cafe, Elias walked her halfway back to her apartment. It was the first time he didn't send a driver. As they reached her building, she turned. To him, you're different than what people say about you. He raised an eyebrow. What do people say? That you're cold. Untouchable? Business obsessed? He nodded slowly. And what do you think now? She hesitated, then said, I think you're trying really hard not to feel things. He looked down at the sidewalk. Then said, barely audible, maybe I am. Nora didn't push. She didn't ask for more. She just looked up at him and said gently, You don't have to be scared of kindness, Elias. His eyes met hers, vulnerable. For a fraction of a second, then she stepped away. But she knew, in some quiet, unspoken way, he would come back, and he did. Asterisk, asterisk, they never called it anything. There were no labels. No date nights. No confessions whispered beneath the moonlight, but still, something real began to take shape. Sometimes. Elias would show up at Nora's hospital after a long shift. No notice, no fanfare. Just him standing quietly near. The entrance, a bag of her favorite chips in hand or a warm drink in a carrier. Other nights, she'd find a driver waiting outside. No words exchanged except, he said not to let you walk home alone. They didn't talk about it. They didn't talk about much at all. But she noticed everything, like how he always listened more than he spoke. How he remembered the smallest details, the way she liked her coffee, that she hated loud restaurants, that she hadn't been to a movie theater in years, because there was never time. And he noticed things too. He noticed how she carried herself. Upright, steady, even when she was clearly running on empty. How she greeted every patient like they were someone's mother or child. How she never asked for help. Elias didn't say it, but she reminded him of someone. Someone he'd loved deeply and lost far too young. Nora didn't know that yet. She just knew that when he looked at her, it wasn't with pity or infatuation. It was with something more respectful, more careful, like she was someone who mattered. One night, they sat side by side on the cold stone steps of the Metropolitan Museum, sipping cheap hot chocolate and watching snow melt on the pavement. Neither of them said a word for a long time, until Elias finally broke the silence. You ever wonder why we keep bumping into each other? Nora smiled slightly. You mean the mysterious billionaire who keeps showing up exactly when I'm exhausted, freezing, or emotionally fried? He looked over at her. Something like that. I don't believe in fate, she said softly. Neither. But I do believe, she continued, that some people show up exactly when you need them. He turned to her again, his voice low. Do I? She didn't look at him, just sipped her drink. Then said quietly, yeah, you do. The next time they saw each other, it wasn't planned. She was walking home from the hospital, and he was leaving a quiet board dinner in a black coat and tailored scarf. They crossed paths near a bookstore that was still open, its windows glowing amber in the dark. They didn't say anything. He just turned and fell into step beside her like he belonged there. Come on, he said after a block. I know, place with decent tea and terrible pie. She didn't ask questions. She just nodded. That became the pattern, unspoken, unforced. She never stayed the night. He never asked her to, but slowly, her presence slipped into his space, a pair of gloves left on his kitchen counter, a mug she used more than once, a laugh that echoed in the corners of his apartment long after she left. They weren't dating. They weren't anything, but every time she left, he found himself staring at the door longer than he should. And when she returned, it always felt like the apartment exhaled. They were two people learning how to breathe again, not in grand gestures, but in ordinary moments, and somehow that was more sacred than anything either of them had known. It happened on a Thursday. Nora had just finished her third consecutive shift. No breaks, no meals, not even time to sit. The hospital was overrun, flu season, understaffing, another budget cut, and 2 nurses out sick. She kept going. Because she always did, until she didn't. She was walking between patient rooms when the hallway tilted. She blinked, confused by the blur in her vision. She reached for the wall but missed. Then everything went dark. She collapsed right there, her body hitting the floor in silence. By the time the crash team reached her, she was unconscious, pale, shaking, severely dehydrated and undernourished. There was no emergency contact listed. No next of kin, but someone still showed up. Within 30 minutes of the call, Elias's black car pulled up outside the entrance. The moment he walked into the building, heads turned, not because they recognized him, but because of the force of his presence. He didn't speak to the nurses, didn't ask permission. He just found her room, opened the door, and stopped cold. Nora lay motionless on the hospital bed, and the fourth dripped steadily beside her, feeding fluids into a body that had been pushed too far for too long. Her skin was pale. Her hair, usually pulled back, spilled across the pillow like quiet surrender. Elias stepped in slowly, his jaw tight. He moved to the chair beside her bed and sat down, silent. Then he reached for her hand. It was cold. He pressed it between both of his, like his mother used to do when he was sick as a child. He didn't cry, but something inside him cracked open. Hours passed. She stirred just after midnight, her eyelashes fluttering. When her eyes finally focused, the first thing she saw was him sitting there, hair tousled, coat folded on the floor, sleeves rolled up, looking more shaken than she'd ever seen him. You came, she whispered. He let out a breath. You passed out. Oh, she said faintly. I didn't mean to. You haven't eaten properly in days. You haven't slept. I've been busy, she mumbled. Nora, he said, and her name in his voice made her chest tighten. I'm fine. You're not, Elias snapped. He stood abruptly, pacing the room. His hands clenched at his sides. You work 2 jobs, you skip meals. You walk home in the cold. You think that's nothing? She winced. I didn't want you to know. He stopped. Turned to her, eyes stormy. Why? Her voice broke. Because I didn't want to owe you anything. I didn't want you to think I was weak. He moved toward her slowly. Is that what you think I'd see? Nora wiped her eyes, ashamed. You're used to people with perfect lives? Perfect control? I didn't want you to see the mess? He sat beside her again, took her hand, this time firmly. I've seen your strength every time you stepped into someone else's pain and treated them like they mattered. She met. His gaze, raw. He added softly, You've been holding the world together with your bare hands. But you don't have to do it alone. The tears came fast. No defenses left. And for the first time, she let someone see her. All of her. Not the nurse, not the helper. Just the woman who needed to be held up for once. Elias stayed with her the rest of the night. He never let go of her hand. Asterisk, asterisk, they never talked about the night in the hospital, but everything changed after it. There was no formal invitation. No packed bags, no grand decision. One evening, Elias offered to drive her home after another brutal shift. Nora slipped into the passenger seat with a groan, pulled his coat around her, and murmured, "I don't really live there anymore." "Do I?" He didn't answer with words. He just nodded once and kept driving, not toward her old apartment, but toward his dot. After that, her toothbrush showed up beside his in the bathroom. Her scrubs were folded next to his pressed shirts in the closet. She found her favorite, tea already stocked in the kitchen cabinet. A soft blanket appeared on the couch, the exact kind she liked, fuzzy and warm, tucked neatly beside a copy of the book she'd mentioned once in passing. She didn't ask how he remembered. He never brought it up. But the gesture meant more than any bouquet ever could. Still, some things didn't come as easily. Elias never said the words, not "I love you," not "stay with me," not even "I miss you." He never asked her to sleep in his bed. He took the couch most nights, claiming he was used to it, that he worked late, that he didn't want to wake her dot at first. Nora thought it was old-school chivalry. Then she realized it was fear, not of her, but of what she represented: closeness, vulnerability, need, and Elias Grant had built his life on avoiding all three. He showed affection differently. A hot container of soup waiting in the hospital fridge with a handwritten note that read, "Eat, please." A courier delivering a new winter coat to her shift after she forgot hers in a rush. One her favorite color, fitted perfectly, clearly expensive, clearly chosen with care. A framed photo of her, laughing, hair windblown, sitting quietly on the bookshelf in his office. Where no one else ever went, she noticed, but the wall between them stayed up. Not cruel, just quiet. One evening, Nora came home from work to find the lights dimmed, a fire crackling, and Elias nowhere in sight. She found him in his office, staring out the window. The photo of his mother sat on the desk beside him. Her own photo, just inches away. "You always look at that picture when something's wrong," she said gently from the doorway. He didn't turn. "It helps me remember." "Remember what?" "That people like her, like you, still exist." Nora swallowed. She stepped closer. "Elias, what are we doing?" He finally turned to face her. "What do you mean? This?" She gestured around the space. "We live together. We eat meals together. You take care of me, but you never let me in. I don't know if I'm your partner or your guest." He looked down, jaw tight, shoulders tense. "I want you here," he said too quickly. "Then why does it feel like I'm still standing at the edge of your life, waiting for an invitation?" He exhaled sharply. "Because every time I let someone in," he said slowly, "they leave." Nora's voice cracked. "I'm not someone, I'm me. I know." His voice broke. What makes it harder?" She stared at him for a long moment, then stepped back. "I love you, Elias." His eyes widened. "But I can't keep loving someone who's afraid of needing me back." And then, for the first time, she walked away first. The door closed behind her with a soft click, but the silence she left behind, it wasn't gentle anymore. It was hollow. Asterisk, asterisk. Elias didn't sleep that night. He stayed in the office long after Nora left, staring at the door like it might open again, but it didn't. Her coat was still on the hook. Her favorite mug sat by the sink, half full of tea she didn't finish. He didn't touch anything. It felt like she might come back. Like if he kept the place exactly as she left it, this wouldn't feel so final. But as the hours passed, the apartment changed. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was punishing. He didn't call her. He didn't go after her, not because he didn't want to, but because he didn't know how to bridge the distance. Inside himself, for the first time in years, Elias canceled meetings, postponed calls, delayed a deal that had been in the making. For over 6 months, his assistant blinked when he said, "Cancel Tokyo." "Sir, they're expecting confirmation. Cancel it." He said again, then he stood up, grabbed his coat, and walked out of the building. No driver. No car. Just him. He went to the hospital, his heart pounding in his chest in a way it hadn't since he was a kid. He wasn't sure what he expected. A glance. A confrontation? Anything. But the front desk nurse frowned when he asked for her. Nora. Fields? She repeated, checking her computer. Oh, she transferred 2 weeks ago. His heart dropped. What? She's not with this facility anymore. No forwarding info either. He stared at her, stunned. She didn't even say goodbye, he murmured. The nurse looked up. Are you family? Elias paused. No, he said quietly. I guess not. He stepped outside. Snow was falling again, light, steady, unrelenting. It melted against his skin without a trace. He walked through the courtyard, aimless, unsure what to do with the weight in his chest. She was gone, just like his mother had been, without warning, without words, but this time, he'd been the one who left the door closed too long. He sat on a bench, letting the cold sink in, and whispered to the sky. She was the only thing that made me feel human. No one heard him. No one was supposed to. The next few weeks passed in a haze. His life moved around him, but Elias barely touched it. The penthouse was still hers in subtle ways. The blanket on the couch, the book on the nightstand, her scent, lingering faintly in the hall, but she wasn't there, and neither was he. Not really. He walked through boardrooms like a shadow, executed decisions like muscle memory, but the fire that had sparked inside him the night he saw her at that bus stop, the one that reminded him of his mother, of warmth, of feeling, it flickered low until one morning, a year later, something shifted. His phone rang. A voice on the other end said words he hadn't expected. Mr. Grant, we just received a request for a patient donation form. A Nora Fields recently applied for an emergency family leave at a small hospital in upstate New York. She listed your anonymous foundation as the reference contact. He stood frozen. Then slowly, the world tilted back into color. She was back. In the city. He didn't waste a second. He found her by accident, or maybe Elias thought the city conspired to give him one more chance. It happened on a snowy Tuesday morning. He had taken a rare detour, a quiet walk instead of the usual chauffeured ride. His feet led him to a small flower shop tucked between an old bookstore and a cafe she used to love. He paused outside. Something about the window display, white tulips, her favorite, drew him in. The bell above the door chimed softly as he stepped inside. And there she was. Nora. Standing near the back, her back to him, inspecting a bundle of soft winter daisies. Her hair was a little shorter now. She looked stronger, still tired but more at ease, as if she'd built herself a life where she didn't have to carry the weight of the world alone. He froze, heart pounding. And then she turned. Their eyes met. Neither of them spoke. For a moment, the shop around them disappeared. The murmurs of customers, the scent of roses, the cold air from the open door. All of it vanished. All that remained was her, and the space between them, still filled with everything left unsaid. She looked at him like he was a ghost, older, softer, sadder. He stepped forward slowly, giving her time. You're back, he said quietly. She nodded. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. My aunt had a stroke. I came to care for her. Just temporarily. Elias nodded. He gestured to the flowers in her hand. You still like white tulips? You remembered. I remember everything. About you. The weight of that hung in the air. She looked down. I didn't expect to see you here. I didn't expect to find you, he admitted. But I never really stopped hoping. Her breath hitched. Then he said it. The same words he'd said that very first night, only this time they meant something entirely different. You're coming with me. She blinked, startled by the words, but his voice softened. If you still want to. Her eyes filled instantly, against her will. I waited, he said. Too long. I didn't say what I should have. I didn't show up when it counted most. But I kept everything, Nora, every piece of you. Her lips trembled. Even after I left, I never let you go. She didn't answer. Not with words. Instead, she stepped forward and slowly placed her hand into his, just like that first night. Only now she wasn't cold or shivering or scared. Now she was steady. So was he. He didn't pull her into a kiss. He didn't make promises with grand gestures. He just held her hand as if he'd been waiting forever to feel it again. And in that moment, it was enough. More than enough, because two people who once couldn't say what they felt were finally standing in the same place. No walls. No fear, no silence, just each other. Elias didn't take her back to the penthouse. That place had become a museum of silence, a space filled with things but empty of her. Instead, he brought her to a warm apartment overlooking the edge of Central Park, smaller, cozier, earthier, the kind of place that whispered comfort. Instead of echoing solitude, Nora stepped inside slowly, her fingers still laced with his. The scent hit. Her first, cinnamon, wood, something faintly citrus. Then she saw it, her blanket, folded neatly on the couch, her favorite mug, a small framed photo of her laughing in Central Park, the same one she'd forgotten he ever took. You kept everything, she whispered, stunned. He turned toward her, voice steady but aching. I kept you. The words landed like a soft exhale. She walked slowly through the space, eyes catching small details, a vase she once admired in passing, now sitting on a shelf, a copy of the book she left behind resting on the knitstand. Why? She finally asked, her voice catching. He looked at her, his expression open in a way she hadn't seen before. Because I couldn't forget you, Elias said simply. I didn't know how. She sank onto the couch and pulled the blanket around her, more from emotion than cold. You know, she said after a moment, I used to wonder if I made it all up. The way you looked at me, the way you took care of me in all those quiet ways. You didn't make it up? And I didn't. You say anything? Elias sat beside her, not touching her yet. Just close? Because I didn't know how to want someone out loud, he admitted. And I thought if I did, I'd lose you, her voice cracked. You lost me anyway. He nodded, gaze falling. I know. And I hated myself for it, every single day. Silence fell between them, not the kind that hurts, but the kind that listens. Then she said, You don't have to say everything now, but you can't shut me out again. I won't survive that a second time. He reached for her hand again, gently this time, reverently. I won't, he whispered. This time, you don't have to carry anything alone. She leaned into him, slowly, cautiously, and rested her head against his shoulder. They stayed. Like that as dusk wrapped the city in blue shadows, the hush of wind rattling softly against the windows. Inside, the world felt still. It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't movie-perfect. It was two people choosing to show up again, this time, without hiding, and that was everything. They didn't rush anything. There were no candlelit proposals, no staged declarations. Instead, life came back in pieces, slow, warm, and honest. Mornings meant two mismatched mugs of coffee and gentle silences shared on the balcony. Nights meant her head on his shoulder and his hand resting lightly over hers, as if even in sleep, he was afraid to let go. Nora settled back into the city, not as a temporary visitor, but as someone returning on her own terms. She resumed her work at a new clinic on the east side, smaller than her old hospital, but better in ways that mattered. They let her breathe, let her lead, let her care without burning out. And Elias? He started showing up. Not just for her, but for himself. He canceled fewer meetings. Ate meals at the table instead of at his desk. Sometimes he walked to her clinic and waited outside just to walk her home. He was still Elias Grant, sharp-suited, high-profile, difficult to read. But around her something had softened, and one soft summer morning, in the garden of his family's restored home, they married. It wasn't a grand affair, just the people who mattered, a handful of old colleagues, a few patients who insisted on coming, and a frail man with a kind smile Nora once helped during a health fair. He stood to speak during the ceremony, voice trembling as he said, She's always been an angel, and now she's found someone who saw her wings before anyone else did. Elias stood in front of her with no notes, no rehearsed vows. Just words that trembled slightly but never faltered. I didn't know how to love before you, but I'm learning. because of you. And I promise to keep learning every day we get. Nora cupped his cheek, her voice barely a whisper. Then we'll learn together. That night, long after the laughter faded and the last guest left, they curled up on the porch wrapped in the old blanket she once used to fight off loneliness. The summer wind rustled through the trees. Fireflies blinked in the garden. Nora leaned into him, watching the sky. I never thought a snowstorm at a bus stop would bring me home, she said. Elias kissed her hair, then tilted her face gently toward his. That night, he said softly, I didn't save you. She looked at him, confused. He smiled. You saved me. And he meant it, because for a man who had spent his whole life believing silence was safer than love, Nora was the only one who saw his quiet and stayed. She never demanded more than he could give. She just waited until he realized he had more to offer. And in the end, that's what love really looked like. Not rescue. Not perfection, just presence, a hand held in the dark. A bowl of ramen at 1 a.m. Second chance you never thought you'd get. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that sometimes the quietest love is the strongest, leave a comment below. Tell us the moment that stayed with you most. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life inspired stories that heal, uplift, and stay long after the screen fades. Until next time, stay warm, stay kind. And remember, sometimes the smallest act of care can change everything.